Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. My name is Plami, and in this episode of Plami's Thoughts On, I'm gonna be sharing my thoughts to a horror movie that I just finished watching called Astral. This is not going to be a spoiler-free review, so if you are interested in checking out this movie, which I definitely think you should, go watch the movie and then come back to this video, because I don't want to spoil anything about it, because if I do, you're pretty much gonna know about the best part of this movie. So yeah, I would definitely advise you to check it out, and it's definitely a movie that I think people should check out. Even though it has one big problem at the end of the movie, the first two acts are genuinely good, and I think people should check it out. So yeah, from this point onwards, it's full spoiler stuff, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click away. But anyway, if you don't know anything about this movie, this is a British horror movie which stars Frank Delane, who you might know from Fear the Walking Dead, which is a show that I've reviewed recently, and I will be reviewing more of its seasons soon. In that show, he plays Nick, who is the main character of that show, at least for the first few seasons. And personally, I love him as an actor, Frank Delane. He's such an eccentric and interesting guy. He's so intriguing, and I love him. And he's actually the reason why I decided to watch this movie. That and the fact that it's a horror movie, and I love me a horror movie. I'm a huge horror movie fan. Although every time I watch a horror movie, as I'm watching it, I always regret watching it because I get scared by it. I'm a very easily scared person. But then once I finished watching it, I always love the experience of it, even though in the moment I don't like it. So I wish I had somebody else to watch horror movies with, because that would definitely help me out with the fear part of it. But anyway, I actually was told, and I saw like most people were talking about this movie in a way that it's bad, that it's wasted opportunity, and I definitely agree in a way that it wastes a certain thing about itself. But I was actually surprised by how much I actually enjoy this movie, and a huge reason why I enjoy this movie is for sure the character, the main character of this movie, called Alex, who, as I said, is played by Frank Delane. And it's not simply because I love the actor why I fell in love with the character, but it's actually because I actually really related to his character, the character of Alex. And I don't know how to exactly explain how I feel about it, and I think this is a reason why this movie is not gonna work for everyone, but I really related to the character of Alex. He genuinely felt like me. That's the best way I can put it. He felt like me. I have so many similar traits to the character of Alex, because in this movie, the character of Alex, like the first time we see him, he's I believe in university, and he's in a lecture about different planes of existence, and somehow that plays into astral projection, and I don't exactly get how, but I'm gonna talk about it in a little bit. So we see him in university, and we see his character, which is a bit of a weird person who wants to know, who is very knowledgeable and wants to learn more about interesting and obscure stuff that most people would consider weird or just not interesting. Like, he's a very, I don't know, he feels, I guess, in a way like an INTJ, which is a type of a personality. Maybe you've heard of Myers-Briggs, I think that's the name of it, where people can only have like 16 types of personalities, and I believe in this movie the main character is an INTJ, because I relate to him in so many ways, and his character feels so similar to me, and I feel like that's why I was so immersed in this movie, because of that, because it felt like I was experiencing those events. I feel like I genuinely would be behaving the same way if I was experiencing those stuff, and that made the movie so much better for me because of that. And in other ways that I related to him, like he dresses how I would dress, he looks how I would look, and how I kind of looked in high school with the long hair and everything. And he has similar relationships and experiences with his friend group as I had in with mine in when I was in high school. Although I would say that the experiences with his friends in this movie are much more of like an idealistic version of what I experienced when I was in high school. Because in high school, while the basics were still the same for me, I was still like this kind of an eccentric person who has weird interests that most people don't really care about. I was also much more of a close person, and I feel like by the last 2 years of high school, I was pretty much like a ghost to everybody. I would barely talk to anybody. I would constantly have my hood on. I would constantly be with my headphones in my ears and just not talk to anybody. So the type of experiences in this movie where he actually talks to his friends who are very different from him, and he's still the eccentric person in the group, feels like an idealistic version of what I wanted my high school in my high school years to be, because I've always wanted to be the cool, unique person. Like that's what I love. I've always wanted to be unique and stand out from everybody, but I feel like I didn't quite achieve that in high school. Yeah, I'm getting a little sidetracked and talking too much about myself, but instantly that immersed me into the movie so much, because he behaved in exactly the ways that I would have behaved. So let's get into the movie and recap all the things that happen, and I'm gonna get into all the things that I have to say little by little. So we open the movie with a woman in a psychiatric facility or something, who is just about to be released. We're not told exactly why she was there, and I don't think even by the end of the movie we really understand that. Although the movie might tell you it's because she went through astral projection thing, and that's what caused her troubles and everything. But we open up the movie with that woman being released from psychiatric hospital, and then one evening she is sitting on the couch with her husband and son, who is drawing while the husband is sleeping, when she hears a noise on the second floor. So she goes up to check it out, and in the beginning of the movie we were kind of meant to assume that maybe her son was up there in his room, maybe making noise. Obviously, considering we know that it's a horror movie and that it's astral projection, we know that it's probably some kind of poltergeist or a ghost thing that is making that noise. So I expected some kind of scare in the beginning, but this movie actually handles the scares really well. And if I gotta be honest, it doesn't really even have a jump scare. It has like one, maybe. It has like one jump scare, and it feels earned at that point, because it wasn't like blah 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 for like 40 minutes beforehand before it gives it to you. So I actually really like that jump scare, and I expected it, so it didn't bother me as much as in other movies where it's just like splashed in your face every single time. So yeah, she ends up going to the second floor, and she comes out of her room carrying a scarf, and by that point I knew that she was going to hang herself, which reminded me of the movie Ouija, which I don't know whether it was released before this movie or after, but it reminded me of it. And later on, it has one scene that I'm gonna talk about later, but it reminded me of another movie that I've reviewed. I'm pretty sure it's the first movie that I reviewed on this channel, called Lights Out. So there's actually a lot of reminders like in this movie that remind me of other movies. Anyway, after this scene, we get to the beginning scene, which I talked about just a little bit ago, where we meet Alex for the first time with his student friends and everything. And in the opening scene, he is in a lecture from what I understood about some kinds of planes of existence, but I still don't exactly understand what exactly kind of lecture was this. Because what kind of lecture in a university is going to have something like this to talk about? The best I can think of is maybe psychology, and I don't even really think it really works with that. So if you guys have any answers to that, if you've seen this movie, comment them down below, because I have no idea whatsoever. But anyway, as I said earlier, I love how he is the one, well, he's not necessarily the one who questions the teacher who is doing the lecture about those things, but he's clearly the one who is the most interested in it, in a way. And that instantly made me fall in love with him, because I'm the kind of person as well, and it has happened many times in classes where the teacher will be talking about something and I will be the one who might be like really into what they're talking about, even though I might not be the one who is talking and replying to the teacher in a way, you know. And we're introduced to all his friends' characters as well in that scene. And again, I think they are actually fairly realistically done. Like, all the characters, including him, are actually surprisingly relatable and real feeling in a way. I never felt like I was taken out of the movie by them, except by one of the female characters, and in like the third act, and maybe from the second half of the second act, I would say, is where I started to get taken out of the movie a little bit because of her, and I'm gonna get into why when we get there. But yeah, in this whole beginning part, I just love seeing the relationship between these characters, because I can relate to it so much, and I loved it because of that. So at the end of the lecture, this teacher gives them an assignment about these like planes of existence, and as they were explaining in the movie, for a snail there's only there's no time. Like, snails apparently don't experience time, they don't think in terms of time, while dogs do. And for humans, we have time and space, so we think in like 3 dimensions or something like that they were explaining. So the assignment was about whether there's another plane of existence that even humans cannot tell and experience, but that there are other creatures that can. So again, I don't really get why would you be studying that in university, but I don't know. So yeah, for like, I'd say about the first like 10 minutes or 20 minutes of this movie, it's pretty much seeing the relationships between the characters and the typical day, how typical day goes for them. There's another thing that plays into the relatability of this setting and the characters, and especially the main character, where after talking to this teacher about the assignment, he goes to the library to study more about it, because he wants to attempt astral projection to meet and talk with the spirit of his dead mother, who was the character that we saw in the beginning movie kills herself. And during that scene in the library, we see 2 of the female characters that we see in one of the scenes during the lecture. So in that scene, we can clearly see that one of the female characters, who her name is Alicia, or Alisa, I think is her name, has an affection for Alex, and her other friend is egging her on to actually reveal her feelings towards him. And it actually reminded me of one experience that I had in, I believe it was like middle school, like just before high school. And made me relate to the character of this movie so much more because of that. Because there was one experience, as I said, in late middle school, where there was one girl who was 1 grade above me, and one day as I was playing on my smartphone, she and some of her friends from her class came to my class's room. And she talked to me, and she asked me if she wanted me to be together with her, like a boyfriend and girlfriend kind of thing. And I was too blindsided by the video game, and I guess didn't believe that it was happening, that she was actually being serious about it. So I kind of shrugged it off, and to this day I kind of regret it, and to see the same thing happen in this scene in the movie, because in the movie Alex doesn't notice the way that Alyssa is behaving towards him, that she's clearly into him. It was kind of painful. I was cringing throughout that scene, but I loved it because it's so relatable to me, and I was super immersed by this point in this movie. So it did a really good job to immerse me at this point. So after researching more about astral projection, Alex decides to attempt it, but ends up failing and just falls asleep. And on the other day, he ends up going to the teacher to ask him more about astral projection and how he can do it properly, and he gives him more information. And on the next day, he actually attempts it and succeeds in doing it, but he has no proof, and his friends don't believe him. So they come up with a way to actually prove that he is actually astral projecting, which is some kind of a string and something at the end of the string or something like that, which you can actually affect when you're astral projecting. Like, it's just like a bow on a string that is swinging left and right, and if a spirit or a person who is astral projecting goes close to it, it would actually start moving much more. So they also set up a camera to record that, to prove that he's actually astral projecting. And everything goes okay. He actually moves it, and then he wakes up, but doesn't turn off the camera, so he gets to sleep. And at that point, he's not astral projecting anymore, but still the bow ends up moving much more than he did when he touched it. So that makes you believe that there's something else that is also inside the room. So he decides to do it again on the next night, and I think he even puts 2 or more, not just 1. So he ends up doing it again, but this time another black figure shows up. And I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of the effects for the creature, or whatever you want to call it, the spirit, because it felt very similar to the effects that were used for Paranormal Activity 6, the ghost dimension, because in that one you can also see like a spirit figure in all black and everything. It felt very similar to that. It just wasn't scary in a way. Like, literally during the first night in which he was astral projecting, after he astral projected and went to sleep, there's one scene while he's sleeping in which he's lying in such a weird way, because I guess he has trouble sleeping and he just shifts when he's sleeping a lot, he moves a lot. He was standing in such a way where his hands and legs were just pointing in a weird direction that it scared me, because I thought something weird was happening in that scene. Like, that scared me more than seeing the black figure show up out of nowhere. He ends up searching online about information about these shadow people, and he finds information that if you start seeing them, you should stop astral projecting, because that means because otherwise things are gonna get worse. So he decides to stop doing it. But here comes an interesting part, where even his flatmates, who he is sharing a flat with, start seeing them. And this is the scene that feels very similar. Like, it's literally kind of a rip-off of Lights Out, which made me kind of laugh out loud when I saw it. Because if you've seen the movie Lights Out, and I definitely suggest you to watch that movie because it's such a good movie. In that movie there's a creature or whatever which, if there's light shining on it, it kind of doesn't exist. Like, you can't see it and it's not there, but in the dark you can see the silhouette of it. So that's basically the same concept here. One of his flatmates sees a black figure standing at the corner of a room, or at least that black thing that we saw on the camera earlier, and he keeps flipping the switch on and off, and it keeps disappearing when the light's on it. And it works. It's creepy. It worked in Lights Out, it works here, and in a way I would say that it works better here, because in Lights Out they end up revealing something about the creature that kind of ruins it a little bit for me. I prefer if they didn't reveal what it was, because when we didn't know what it was much scarier. And in this case, in the case of this movie, um, we're not exactly ever revealed what those shadow people are. We're kind of told a little bit in a way, but it's still not outright said. And it's something spiritual. Like uh, it's not just a person who has died or something like that. It's something like demons or spiritual. So that works much better as a fear factor. So yeah, at that point, he searches up online again and shares that even his flatmates are starting to see that, and he ends up contacting a psychologist who is the same person who was treating his mother in the opening few minutes of the movie, which he doesn't know at first actually, and he's revealed that fact, and he kind of blames that person for his mother's death even though it's not his fault. And I believe here is where the best moment of this movie happens, which is at first you have he goes to the library again, I guess, to learn more about astral projection, maybe how to stop it and do something about it. And as he is reading the book, he looks up and he sees a black figure with like a I don't know what to call it, like a ram, a head of a ram on it, like kind of like a Satan, basically, kind of how it looks, although it's not Satan. It's like completely black face and everything. And I just love Frank Delane, the way he plays out this scene, because he's totally terrified, because this is different from what he has been seeing until that point. Until that point, he's just been seeing like just black clouds, basically. Just shadow people who are like black clouds. While in this case, it was like a demonic figure with an actual face that you can see. And I just love how he's trembling with fear. And because he's in the library, he can't just scream because everybody would think he's crazy. So he just like... he plays it in such a good way. Like, it's the best scene of this movie. I love it. It's my favorite scene by far. I really like this scene because the camera pans to his hands and you just see them tremble like this. Like, it's such a good scare. And by the way, that's not the jump scare I'm talking about. I don't really consider this a jump scare as well, because it's not just like a wham in your face in a way. It just shows it to you and it disappears, and you just see Frank Delane, or the character of Alex's reaction to it. And I just fucking love it how terrified he is. He plays it off so fucking well. Like, this movie is worth it just for Frank Delane's acting alone. I believe that scene also might have been before he went to talk to the psychologist, so take that however you want. I'm not exactly sure how it was timeline wise, but at some point later he ends up walking around the campus, I guess you could say. And by the way, the setting for this movie, the campus, is actually a really cool location. It definitely added a little bit to the atmosphere of this movie, and it is a fairly small budgeted movie when you think about it, but I think it did pretty well with its budget. So he's walking around the campus and he starts to see these black figures even just during the day while walking everywhere, and he just sees a black figure in front of him, and he's questioning whether he's even seeing it. He feels like he's going insane at that point a little bit. And there are quite a few scenes even afterwards where you just can feel like something is following him, and he's terrified because of that fact that things keep following him. And I really like, I really relate to this feeling as well, because if you watch some of my horror movie reviews before, I think I might have reviewed that the movie The Ring kind of traumatized me for most of like my early teenage years and my childhood. I watched it in 2007, I think it was, and it traumatized me genuinely until like 2016. I was afraid of the dark until I was like 16, and even to this day I'm still a little creeped out, I guess you could say. Um, like every time I go in the dark, I always second guess myself, and I'm worried that I'm gonna see something in the dark that's gonna scare the shit out of me. Even today, and I'm 20 years old right now, and it just still scares me. So the feeling that I really related to the feeling that he was getting, that something kept following him in the dark. I really related to that feeling. I genuinely feel like this movie was made for me. Like, I love it so much, and it appeals to me in so many ways. I genuinely feel like this movie was made for me. It's a perfect movie for me. But luckily, at that point where he keeps being followed by shadows, he's going back to his flat, and he's one of his female friends who we earlier saw try to reveal his feelings, her feelings towards him, comes to visit him and actually ends up sharing his feelings. And he's actually glad to see her because he was feeling like he was very tense and scared, like he was creeped out. So he was glad to see another person in a way. And as she was trying to reveal her feelings towards him, he kept hearing the exact same noises that his mom was hearing in the opening of this movie, which makes me believe that those spirits or whatever ended up causing her to kill herself. Although I don't get why, because at the end of this movie, Alex doesn't end up being killed, so I don't know. But she ends up sharing her feelings towards him, and they end up kissing, and they end up going to bed apparently. Because in the next scene we see them sleeping, and I really like this scene because it's set up in a way like where you can kind of experience the feeling of sleep paralysis. I don't know if you guys have experienced that. I have actually experienced it a couple of times, like about 3 or 4 times, or at least the feeling of very realistic, I mean, you could say actually hallucinations is more how I would describe it, because I was awake during that time, but I thought I saw things that maybe weren't there, which, I mean, they most likely weren't there, but still. And it really reminded me of that, because in that scene you have the 2 characters sleeping, and you can see the black shadow just rise up behind the back of the main character, Alex, who is just sleeping with his back towards the wall, and you can see the black figure raise up, and it's so creepy. And then something ends up pulling his girlfriend off the bed, and they all jump and wake up. So it wasn't exactly the experience of being paralyzed in your sleep, but it's kind of similar or reminiscent of it. And for me, it was close enough, I would say. It reminded me of the times when I have experienced that. And if you're curious about what exactly I experienced when that happened, I believe it was in like 2016 or 2017. It was in the middle of the night, so I was sleeping, and when I woke up, I obviously couldn't move because it is sleep paralysis. And I could see a black figure at the end of the room, and at one point that black figure ended up running towards my face and screamed at me in a way. Like, I think you need the context as well that, as I said, I was traumatized by The Ring, so that's kind of what I saw. I saw a black figure with like a white gown and a very disfigured face, and she ran up to my face and screamed, and I closed my eyes at that point and tried to move, and I ended up moving the big toe on my foot and ended up moving afterwards as well. And then I just turned towards the wall and slept, and that was it. There has been a couple of times afterwards that I've had sleep paralysis like this, or at least these kind of hallucinations, but that is probably the biggest one that I've had, because it's the one that I was scared the most, because it was the first time that I experienced not being able to move as I'm awake. It's so scary. You feel like you're paralyzed pretty much. But I actually find the other time when I've had this kind of experience a much scarier event, because at that point I'm pretty sure like I had some kind of a nightmare, and I got up. I was sitting on my bed, and I fucking swear, like my vision was kind of blurry a little bit, but I swear I saw something on four legs just run across the room, and I swear I even heard it. So that creeped me the fuck out, and I didn't end up falling asleep for that night because it scared me so much. Because I can even hear it, like I even had an audio hallucination, which I don't know how common that is, but it scared the shit out of me. So I really related to the fear in that scene. So after this experience of getting put off the bed by something, Alex decides to go back to the psychologist to talk to him and get help from him, because he's the only one he knows who believes him about these things and can help him. But once that psychologist hears about the creature, the demonic creature that Alex has seen, he tells him that he can't do anything about it because he hasn't experienced anything like this before. And by the way, that psychologist also saw one of those shadow figures, and like when he flipped the switch up and down, like, and turned the lights on and off, he also saw that. So I assume like maybe he wasn't he was worried about getting involved because he didn't want to die or to be followed by those creatures or whatever. And I think around this point is where the only jump scare in the movie happens, because over the course of the movie, when Alex is doing the astral projection, we see glimpses of I assume the astral plane, for lack of a better term, where it's just a ghosty, like, fog kind of dimension where we see a bunch of things. And even from the first astral projection, we see some kind of figure in the fog with like something on its head, like horns, I think it was, because the demonic creature that we see in the movie does have horns. And every time we see that sequence, we see more and more of that demonic creature. So I think about the third time that we see that, it ends up being a jump scare where the creature turns to you and screams. And honestly, at that point, I feel justified like with the jump scare, because it's the only jump scare in this movie that I genuinely consider like your typical jump scare with like loud music and in your face boo kind of reaction. Because there's other scares like the one in which Alex sees the demonic creature, which I talked about, that I really like, but I don't really consider it a typical jump scare because it's just you see it and it's not like scaring you, it's not in your face scaring you, so it's much more subdued, like it holds itself back. So considering that the movie was building until that point, I feel like they earned that jump scare. But honestly, from this point onwards, the movie pretty much loses it, because not because it releases all the tension that it has building until this point, but because it just goes completely over the top and kind of goes into a completely different direction than what it was going for so far. Because until this point, it was taking itself seriously, and it was trying to tell this story of a young adult who has lost his mother at a young age, and because he didn't know his mom is dead or something like that, he just recently learned about the fact that his mom killed herself, is estranged from his father, and then it just becomes like your typical demonic possession kind of story in this like third act. So it just completely goes off the rails, and we even get the main character getting possessed by the creature that was tormenting him, I guess you could say. And while I think Frank Delane does well in that scene alone, like he acts it out properly and it is pretty cool, I just think it completely misses the mark, because until that point it had a different tone. It was serious and scary and subdued, like it felt like kind of like the Babadook until that point, and then it just became generic horror movie in that third act. Because in the end of the movie, after he fails to get help from the psychologist, he goes to a woman who can read his destiny with tarot cards or something like that, and she ends up feeling the presence of the demonic creatures or whatever they are around them, and she tells Alex that to be able to remove that presence from him and to save him, I guess you could say, they have to learn the name of the demon that is tormenting him. But to do so, Alex has to go back to the astral plane. And honestly, I feel like they really wasted an opportunity here to show us that ghosting dimension again, and from the perspective of Alex in the well, he's astral projecting, because they showed it so far, and because we were told that he needs to learn the name, it could have been cool if we see him just explore this ghostly fog and he just sees the figure and it attacks him. But in some way, during the face-off with him, he learns his name, and then he comes back, and then later off we have basically what we had here in the end with the possession, and where he attacks his girlfriend at that point. I genuinely feel like the third act should have been longer, because this movie is like 80 minutes. I think it genuinely would have benefited from like 20 or 30 more minutes, because until that point the pacing was fine. Like, I was perfectly fine with the pacing. It's a slow burn, but it was pacing itself pretty well. But the third act, it's so rushed, because instead of doing what I just said that it should do, it crams everything into like the last 15 minutes. They go to that person for help to basically banish the demon. She tells them that they have to find his name. They quickly find his name, but at the same time he gets possessed by it, and she, just by repeating a bunch of things, ends up banishing him. And also, I guess because his girlfriend says, "Alex, come back." It's just very rushed of an ending. Until that point it was building itself really well, but it just kind of lost it here at the end. And at the end we are also revealed that that Alex was present in the room where his dad was sleeping, like where his mom was sitting on the couch in the beginning of this movie, because we weren't shown that in the beginning, but we were shown that at the end. And apparently he was drawing a picture of his family and a black figure, which is interesting. But the thing is, the movie ends there, so we're left with no information about what exactly that means. Why? Especially considering when you first get into the movie, you already get that idea right off the bat. Like, you, considering that it's a astral projection movie, it's a horror movie, of course it was the ghosts who caused her to kill herself. Like, that's the first thing you would think of. So keeping it like a twist during the end doesn't really work. I don't know. So yeah, that was Astral. As I said, a fairly good movie, or at least the first two acts of it are really good for me. They're really well paced with really good subdued scares, not in your face kind of scares. But I don't know whether it's a movie for everyone, because as I said, I feel like it worked for me so well because I just related to the character so much. He felt like me. I felt like I was experiencing those things because the character was so similar to me, and he was living in a similar way to me as well. So I'm not sure whether everybody's gonna enjoy it, and I've seen a lot of people trash this movie, but I think it's genuinely worth a watch. It's not a perfect movie, but it's definitely not a bad one, or at least not as bad as I was thinking. It's a little bit better than a mediocre, which is why I'm going to give this movie a 6.8 out of 10. It's between a 6.4 at the very least and 6.8 at most, I would say, because that's the way I'm rating things nowadays. So I'm just giving the lowest and the most and the highest kind of score. So at the very least it's a 6.4 out of 10 kind of movie, and at most it's a 6.8 in those scenes that I really like the subdued demon jump scare in which you see Alex's frightened reaction that I really like. In that scene, it gets to like a 6.8 out of 10 kind of movie. So yeah, it is a fairly good horror movie, and I definitely would tell you to check it out. But I cannot say whether you would like it or not, because it's not for everyone for sure. If you're not a fan of slow burns, and especially the ones who might not have many jump scares, and it's more about the tension that is building in you, not really about the release of the tension, you might not enjoy it. It's like if you enjoy movies like The Babadook, you might not enjoy this one. If you enjoy movies like The Babadook, you probably enjoy this one. But if you don't enjoy movies like The Babadook, you're probably not gonna like this one as well. But yeah, hopefully I managed to share all my thoughts about this movie, because I just have so much. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Also, check out the description to my Twitter if you want to follow me there, and to my Wattpad where I post my stories, because in addition to doing all these videos on my channel, I'm also a writer. And if you end up enjoying my stories, or you simply enjoy my videos, you can head over to Patreon, where you can pledge your support and help keep the channel going, help support me so I can keep writing the stories you enjoy. But if you don't want to do it, that's completely fine. You can still help me out in other ways, like liking this video, subscribing, and especially sharing this video with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And I think it's pretty much it for this video, so hopefully I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye!